everybody, and welcome to our video on the Great Depression and the New Deal. This short lecture video is going to cover the PowerPoint by the same name. So if you'd like to follow along, let's get started. Let's start with the causes of the Great Depression. If you remember from our last video, we talked about Herbert Hoover and his being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and how he didn't really cause the Great Depression, but some people kind of fault him for not doing enough to stop the Great Depression. And we'll kind of see how that happens. So in October of 1929, when the stock market crashed, Herbert Hoover wasn't doing a whole lot. Now, he was concerned, but at the time of the stock market crash, nobody actually expected the entire economy to crash, because that isn't necessarily something that has to happen after a stock market crash. But there's going to be several factors that take place that are going to lead to that, which are going to cause the entire economy to come to a crash. First of all, you've got taxation policy by Congress. Whatever the fiscal policy of the United States government is going to have a major effect on the economy. If you raise taxes, you're going to shrink the economy. If you lower taxes, you're typically going to grow the economy. If the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, they're going to contract the money supply. And if they lower interest rates, they will expand the money supply. And again, they were doing the exact opposite of what they should have been doing. Industry. Industry is overproducing goods. The more stuff that's on the market and the less money people have to buy that stuff, the more that's going to cause the economy to go into a free fall, unemployment, and so forth. Agriculture, same thing. Farmers are making way too much, growing way too many crops, and that's causing the prices of these things to fall dramatically, which is costing them their livelihoods. And on the national level, on the federal level, the tariffs are being raised, which is definitely constricting the economy because fewer foreign countries want to buy our stuff. Herbert Hoover is going to raise the tariff, push for a raised tariff, the Smoot-Hawley tariff. He's going to raise income taxes, and he's going to create the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, also known as the RFC. And what this is going to do is give loans to businesses and banks, and what they're going to do with that money is make more stuff, which is going to have the exact opposite effect as what you're going to want to have on the economy. So another year or two down the road, there's the election of 1932, and Herbert Hoover will be soundly defeated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was running on the platform for a New Deal for the American people. Let's take a look at FDR's politics on the economy. Most liberals are going to be in favor of more government control, while most conservatives are in favor of less government control. Franklin Roosevelt's policies are definitely for a large government with a lot more power. We're going to be moving away from a laissez-faire government, and we're going to be moving toward the left and toward a more powerful federal government that is going to have more control over the economy and more control of the folks who live in that country as well. When FDR takes office in March of 1933, he's going to push for his first 100 days to be extremely effectual by passing numerous laws, which Congress will virtually rubber stamp and say, if you want it, you got it, buddy. And they're going to be passing laws left and right for FDR to create several organizations and government agencies during those first 100 days, including but not limited to the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the National Recovery Administration, the CCC, the TVA. Lots of these agencies that are going to be created are going to be relief organizations, because FDR says the most important thing that we can do at this time is provide relief. Now, he had the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. And he's going to do those in basically that same order. Relief comes first. Those are the people that are struggling. Those are the people who have very little money on hand. Maybe they don't have a job. We got to help those people first. And one of the people that are hurting the worst are the farmers. And the Agricultural Adjustment Act is going to try to raise prices of farm products. Now, some people say, well, we're in a time period where Americans are starving to death because they can't eat. Well, that's not completely true. There were people that had very little money, but we don't know of anybody actually starving to death during the Great Depression. But it wasn't a fun time. Let's not kid ourselves. It was not a fun time. What the Agricultural Adjustment Act is going to do is it's going to try to raise farm prices by slaughtering pigs by the millions and dumping out milk by the thousands of gallons to raise the price of those products, so farmers will be making more money. Now, there's more to it than that, but that's generally what this plan is to do, is to raise farm product prices. The NRA that was created, not the National Rifle Association, this is the National Recovery Administration, a different organization altogether. They're trying to force businesses to abide by rules that basically gut competition, and they're going to agree to similar regulations across the board, which includes things like a minimum wage and lowering their product prices to certain floors where they wouldn't undercut the competition, and maximum prices where they wouldn't charge too much. Eventually, this whole plan is going to be declared unconstitutional, but it was an attempt to get businesses where there basically wasn't any competition. Everybody's kind of working together to get through this thing. Then you have the public works programs. You have lots of public works programs. The Public Works Administration is one of many, and you're going to see several of these things created during the Great Depression under Roosevelt's New Deal. The FERA is also going to be created. And you see the Civilian Conservation Corps created, which is, this is one of the more popular of the programs. A lot of our state parks here, even in Texas, are going to be built by the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. But you have all these public works programs which are designed to give people jobs, to get them out of their unemployment status, and to get them with at least some wage they can live on. And in some of these cases, like the CCC, they are required to send some of their money home to their older parents, because the CCC was just for younger men, because it was pretty hard work. And these guys lived in tents with no air conditioning and 110-degree summers. So it wasn't super fun. The TVA is going to provide electricity for people who had never had it. These mountain men in Tennessee, these hillbillies, the people had kind of made fun of because it was like time left them behind. Many of them didn't even have phone service of any kind. And so the TVA comes in to bring electricity, and it's going to try to dam up the rivers that were flooding crops and flooding some communities. And it's also going to have the very first and only time the government gets into the competition with private business, because the government owned the electricity and the provider of electricity, and they still do to this day. So the TVA is a very controversial element of the New Deal. We have several other things going on, the public works at this time, but another thing to focus on here is the regulations that are going to be taking place, the reform of things that had gone bad that needed to be corrected. One of those is the Glass-Steagall Banking Act, which is going to make it to where banks can no longer bet on the stock market. You can't take money out of people's accounts and bet on the stock market. You have the FDIC created, which is huge. It's insurance on bank accounts, which is still in effect to this day. You have the SEC that's created to oversee the stock market, to make sure that there's no, at least supposed to make sure that there's no hanky-panky going on in the stock market, which I'm sure that doesn't happen anymore. Now, there's going to be a battle, political battle, between the right and the left during this time period, because a lot of folks on the conservative side say the government's growing too powerful, they're doing too much. And on the left, they're saying they're not doing enough, we need to do more and more and more. And FDR is one of those people who says we're not doing enough, we need to do more for the American people. And so when he's reelected, he's going to push forward his next agenda, which is going to be the second New Deal. So the second New Deal is going to do similar things to the first New Deal. It's going to expand work programs. It's going to create the FHA, the Housing Administration. It's going to create the WPA, which is more public works. And this time, these are concentrating on, basically, we're looking at public buildings, public parks, even airports, bridges, and roads. A lot of schools are created by this. A lot of civic type centers are created by this. Probably the most important thing that's done during the second New Deal is the Social Security Act of 1935. I don't even need to explain what the Social Security Act is, because you all have a Social Security number. You all are part of the Social Security system, and this is going to provide basically a retirement income for people who did not save money for their retirement years, and give them a kind of a living wage in their retirement age. Unions are also going to be greatly affected by the New Deal. FDR will sign the Wagner Act, which is going to give power to labor unions and legalize labor unions for the first time in American history. You're going to have the unionization of workers across basically all spectrums. People are joining labor unions. They're going on strike. They're demanding more money. And you're going to see this really hit its heyday in the, I would say, the 50s, 60s, and 70s were kind of the heyday for labor unions. Labor unions are definitely still around. In some states, they're still fairly powerful. But in places like Texas, labor unions have seen their high point, and they're kind of, they're not completely powerless, but they just don't have the power that they used to after they've been regulated somewhat in the last several decades. So the 1936 election, you see FDR run for an unprecedented third term. He'll be reelected again. And in this case, he's going to try to pack the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court, as a more conservative entity, has been striking down some of his laws as unconstitutional. This is going to make FDR very angry, and he decides he wants to put on 10 more justices so that the Supreme Court will lean more to his direction. Something similar to that in current politics is going on and possibly could be seeing the light of day soon. But in this case, FDR is going to be scolded by his own party, and a lot of people who had supported basically everything that he's done, they're going to say this is not really for us. We don't really want to see the Supreme Court packed like that. And so he'll be defeated in his effort to pack the court. Now, also in the year of 1937, we're going to see a second recession come into the United States economy. This is typically called the Roosevelt recession, and a lot of people blame this recession on some of the byproducts of the New Deal and the Second New Deal that was possibly hurting the economy more than it was helping. Now, while all this is going on, don't forget about the farmers and what's going on with the farmers specifically. We've talked about the Agricultural Adjustment Act, but that doesn't just fix everything for the farmers. Out in the Midwest, the Dust Bowl is ravaging farms from Kansas to Oklahoma to Texas. There are farmers who are losing everything because of this very strange phenomenon that's going on. It's a natural phenomenon, but some of it's brought on by some of the stuff the farmers were doing, like dry farming, which is causing the dust particles to just take over the ground after a long drought. And these dust particles get caught up into this very strange wind system that's going to cover and blanket the vast majority of the Midwest. Farmers are going to be leaving for California. They're going to be leaving that area and saying we're done with farming forever. And it's going to be a very dramatic natural disaster, something like we've never seen before in the United States. Now, at the end, when it's all said and done, the farmers will eventually return. The New Deal, a lot of the programs are going to stay into effect. And the New Deal is going to have a huge legacy that is with us to this day. It did a lot of great things for people who were suffering, but it also grew the power of the federal government to an extent that had never been seen before, which will continue to grow in power. But the New Deal will lose its attraction to people as we move into World War II and the entire government begins to focus on the problems overseas rather than the problems at home. And World War II, in a way, works itself out to where the Great Depression becomes a thing of the past, and many credit World War II with ending the Depression itself. So we'll see what happens in World War II and the events there in our next video. Thanks for watching.